Growing up, I was raised by evangelical Christians who believed in the teachings of the Right to Life movement. We had marches, we had children's books, we had speeches on how and why American abortion laws and Roe v. Wade was the Holocaust. As an adult, I struggled to decipher why liberals were so pro-abortion, which I learned later many were not. They were pro-choice. It took a long time to understand what abortion actually was, and what kind of complex restrictions and reasonings the Supreme Court had on abortion. Over time, as a biologist, I began to realize just how blatantly lying the Right to Life movement actually is. Here are the top 10 lies Right to Life uses to keep people voting against their own self-interest because they think they are voting against the Holocaust. Number 10. Late-term abortions are common and people do them out of convenience. When people hear the term late-term abortions, they hear oft-repeated lies by Right to Life that a bunch of lazy sluts couldn't keep their legs closed and waited till the very last minute to go get an abortion. Late-term abortions in third trimesters make up less than 1% of all abortions and are illegal in pretty much every state because at that stage the fetus can survive outside the womb. Therefore, a late-term abortion is medically just called a birth. There are only two reasons a person has one. 1. The life of the mother is in serious danger. Number 2. There is a serious medical problem with the fetus. It's already a tough enough choice. No one wants a late-term abortion unless something horrible happens, and then they have to make a really tough decision as to whether to make the child suffer, lose the life of the mother, or, the third option, have an abortion. Number 9. Abortions lead to increased health problems. If you never grew up in the Right to Life movement, you're probably oblivious to the outright medical lying they do, such as they claim that abortion increases cancer by rates of 600%. It doesn't, and birth control reduces your lifespan. Studies do show that birth control can have a slight increase in breast and other cancers, especially if you smoke, but they also show reductions in even more cancers, and increase lifespans overall in women who take even first-generation birth controls to live longer. One of the many things a lot of Americans fail to realize is, in the US especially, maternal mortality is 26 per every 100,000 births. That's higher than any other developed nation, so birth is a massive risk. So pregnancy and childbirth is a massive risk. And many more have serious long-term health problems caused by having a child. While legal U.S. abortions have a mortality risk of 0.6 deaths per 100,000 procedures, you have a 0.8 in 100,000 person chance of getting struck by lightning. Having a child is a huge risk that could cost you your life or your future health and still cost around $10,000 many these days just can't afford. If someone tries to use safety of the mother as an argument against abortion, they're completely full of it and cherry-picking data. Number 8. Planned Parenthood is the lens crafters of abortions. This one is constantly repeated on the right, which is why Planned Parenthood is the evil boogeyman of the Right to Life movement, essentially the Hitler in concentration camps of abortion. Planned Parenthood really is just a charity women's clinic that helps out poor and working class women. Women in the middle or upper class who want an abortion can just easily go to the doctor, if they of course avoid the 1/3 of hospitals owned by Catholic churches, even if they have to cross state lines because they have decent health insurance. Most people don't protest these hospitals because they aren't vilified because they're just hospitals and they do a lot more things. Planned Parenthood is just a charity women's clinic, and because it's working with women, especially poorer women, in their fertile period, it does statistically perform more abortions than other hospitals compared to other procedures just because it's dealing with women. But even this is just 3% of the procedures they perform: health screenings, STD tests, and other essential women's health to people who can't afford it. Vice President Mike Pence, as governor of Indiana, set up trap laws that shut down abortion clinics, using onerous restrictions and bending the law, which was one of the only accesses to STD screenings. And HIV in one county spiked to levels in some of the worst hit areas of Africa. Attacking Planned Parenthood as a villain without replacing them with some other form of available healthcare hurts entire communities. But the Right to Life doesn't care. They need a villain to hate and scapegoat. Number 7. Partial birth abortions are common. This one is straight up false, but it's used by the Right to Life movement to freak their followers out. Partial birth abortions, a name created by the religious right for an intact dilation and extraction, were invented specifically because they increased the safety of the mother during a late-term abortion, but they were so gruesome that many states decided they were not an option and banned them. All medical procedures are gross and disturbing, and to be honest, feel wrong and unnatural to the average non-medical person. But the pro-life movement has no problem parading their disturbing images of aborted fetuses to shut down any logical discussion people may have. Pro-choicers didn't parade around images of women bleeding out from botched abortions. The worst they tended to do was a coat hanger. Abortion is gruesome and disturbing, especially at a later stage. But remember to refer back to lie number 10. They are very rare and are incredibly hard decisions to make, and are only used in cases of emergency or birth defects. But the Right to Life movement would like you to think they are happening on an assembly line for fun. Number 6. Personhood amendments would end legal abortion. States every election try to pass a personhood amendment under the ignorant belief that it would kill all legal abortions. It shows they don't understand one of the major underpinnings of why safe abortions are legal. It is based on the precedent of bodily autonomy. Prior to Roe v. Wade, the courts had decided that no human being had the right to use another person's body to stay alive. So if I had a rare blood type that someone else had, and I didn't want to give them blood to live, forcing me to give my blood to them would violate my freedom as an American citizen. Otherwise, people could be forced to donate kidneys if they were a match and so on. This is the underpinning of why the court decided that a woman cannot be forced to bear a child to term. Even if the fetus was declared a person, it wouldn't matter. She isn't required to be forced to use her body to keep this fetus person alive. However, the point of viability is fuzzy and ranges between 20 to 24 weeks depending on the child, so the Supreme Court gave the states the rights to decide how late an abortion can occur in this range. Number 5, abortions are unconstitutional. Once you've knocked down the personhood argument, which is 100% constitutional, a pro-lifer plays the final trump card, is that the fetus is trapped against its will, therefore the personhood amendment doesn't apply. So it's not allowing for the basic potential human the choice to decide their own life before they've even formed basic brain functions. So is not allowing the potential human the choice to decide their own life before they've even formed basic brain functions unethical. This is a complex philosophical issue. At what point is life defined as human, alive, and worth protecting is incredibly complex. Well, yes, a fertilized egg is alive, and yes, it does have human DNA that has recombined with a brand new arrangement of DNA. But does that DNA make that fertilized egg any more special or important than, say, a cow that we slaughter on a daily basis? A fertilized egg is literally no different than any other stem cell you have floating around in your body, except with a few protein changes. Why is a recombinant DNA cell any better than anyone else's stem cells or cluster of cells? What about a heartbeat? All that indicates is a blood flow, nothing more. And many people have many disagreements on this issue. However, the biggest belief in the end that drives pro-lifers is that there is a soul, and killing that fertilized egg, 80% of which are naturally aborted by the human body, is akin to murder because God has infused it with a soul. Not everyone believes that. Not everyone thinks that having recombinant human DNA suddenly makes a collection of cells more important than any other unself-aware animal we slaughter without thinking about it. As we cannot measure or detect a soul, using the standard of a soul would require forcing everyone to follow a certain group's religious beliefs, at which point we would have to abstain from eating animals in general, as some religions, such as Hindus, believe that all creatures have a soul. If we're talking potential life, then all sperm needs to be saved and potentially born at some point. If the brain was even close to fully formed, there may be an ethical concern about consent from a non-viable fetus, but as intelligence and awareness is the only measurable method of determining desire and choice, that doesn't appeal to religion. The court decided to circle back to the issue of 20 to 24 weeks as the age of viability. Anything before that is up to the mother. Number 4, most women regret their abortions. The Right to Life hounds people with the idea of post-abortion syndrome, a disorder of massive guilt and depression caused by the regret of having an abortion. However, survey after survey shows that only 1% of women show these symptoms, which means that while some may have very well had a terrible abortion, and some may have had a bad reaction and hormone fluctuations, and they have deep regret and emotional trauma, it's most likely the guilt is caused because people around them or the religious leaders have trained them to feel like they should feel guilty. The number one emotion women express post-abortion is relief, not regret. Number 3, abortion is big business. Using cherry-picked data, the Right to Life website claims that estimating if each abortion costs $451 on average, then just due to the math, Planned Parenthood must make around $147 million a year. Therefore, it's big business and therefore evil. First off, Planned Parenthood is a non-for-profit. None of that money goes to shareholders, only to employees. Profits don't exist. The abortions Planned Parenthood provides is literally the cheapest you can provide and still be completely safe, including doctor's fees, instruments, sterilization, drugs, and the works. Science is expensive and medicine even more so if you want to make it safe and sterile. Yeah, that's a huge number if they aren't used to the medical costs, but that money goes into no one's pockets other than to pay the basic staff so they can have a living. They provide 1/3 of the nation's abortions with no thought of any profits, even though if they were to go into any other form of medicine, that number would skyrocket. Talk about a bunch of greedy, selfish doctors making no money off of women in need. Also, 451 is an average across states, and in some states, the cost is higher because the clinic has to try hard to comply with all the draconian regulations put there for no reason other than to shut them down, called trap laws, as well as to pay for the forced ultrasounds required by state law. Many doctors volunteer at women's clinics for free at the risk of their own life because they believe just as strongly that what they are doing is vital, just as much as the people protesting them outside their clinic believes what they are doing is important. Number 2, fetuses feel pain. As a former right-to-lifer, you are shown videos of fetuses reacting to a D&C by moving away from it. If you've not spent a lot of time in nature or have biology classes where you're supposed to observe stimulus reactions in bugs and other simple animals, this might tug at your heartstrings and make you feel like the fetus is trying to protect itself. The human brain is naturally good at reading emotions and intent. Sadly, it goes overboard with things that don't have emotions or intent, and it's really hard to convince it otherwise. A seahorse would react to this kind of stimulus and it has about as much brains as a fetus at that stage. What science actually shows is that the responses are just reflexes, and the brain is not developed enough to actually process pain until around the 8th month. 2 months after the 24 weeks the Supreme Court marked as late-term abortions. While to a non-biologist it can seem compelling and horrific, the amount of suffering that goes on in an abortion to the fetus is essentially nil. Number 1, if we outlawed abortions, they would go away. This is one of the biggest lies that Right to Life spews. One of the major reasons Roe v. Wade was passed was because anti-abortion laws unfairly targeted the poor. Going abroad or visiting Mexico in the upper middle to upper class was code for going to get an abortion for nearly a century if the woman had sexual indiscretions. Women also had no control over their reproductive health, and one act of sex, often forced on them by their husbands, meant that they were forced to bear another mouth they couldn't feed, locking them in poverty forever, as their kids wouldn't have the means to pull themselves up with good habits, ensuring generational poverty. Prior to Roe v. Wade, one of the top 10 killers of girls 15 to 25 was botched illegal abortions. Similar to needle exchange programs, while the state didn't condone abortions, they had decriminalized them so women and their medically licensed doctors didn't have to face prison time for providing basic body autonomy or worse, life-saving procedures to women who badly needed them if they wanted any kind of future at all. Also, catching a woman trying to get an abortion and imprisoning them for it, or fining them, creates an even less nurturing environment for the child, as there's still way too many unadopted children, so your only option is to ensure that those kids never get adopted, with a flood of forcefully removed babies from women who try and get abortions illegally and are now unfit mothers. You now just have prison as a twisted baby factory. Post-Roe v. Wade data collection of abortions went from 169 abortions per 1,000 live births, which peaked around 1990 at 364 abortions per live birth, but then began dropping with increased access to birth control, public awareness, and sex education, and is now at 12 abortions per 1,000 live births, as per 2013. Around 90% of these abortions occurring before the end of the first trimester, when it's safer and the ethical dilemmas are weakest of all. The Netherlands, where abortions, education, and healthcare are the easiest to get a hold of, the rate is around 10 abortions per 1,000 live births. However, thanks to Republican trap laws making it incredibly hard to get a hold of an abortion, deaths and maimings from illegal abortions have spiked in America by use of unsafe and ill-dosed abortifactors, physical impacts, blister agents, and the old-fashioned coat hanger that America has not seen since before Roe v. Wade, and hospitals are now having to treat botched abortions like never before. The number of actual unsafe abortions are completely unmeasurable too, and we can only count the women who will admit to their doctors. Banning abortions will not stop women from getting an abortion. Abortions are impossible to end, but we know the methods to reduce them at a rate never seen before, and blocking legal abortions definitely makes the problem even worse for women everywhere. In the end, no matter how you personally feel about abortion, even if all of this hasn't convinced you that abortion should remain legal, Right to Life at its core is a lying organization who uses blatant falsehoods, cherry-picking, and lies to dupe its followers to truly view legal abortion as the Holocaust, and the GOP in particular benefits from these lies to no end. If what Right to Life was saying was true, I would be freaking out about Planned Parenthood being the Holocaust as well. Until we can call them out effectively as what they are, a well-funded manipulating misinformation machine, no other issues will matter to these people more than ending the believed genocide that is happening, even though that is not what is happening at all.